Sync Live for Maven Central, which is what you're here to. So there's me. My name is Steve Poole. I work for Sonatype Developer Advocate. And there is my colleague here, AJ, who's also a Sonatype person, who we hope, because we've literally changed this talk slightly to include a demo, which wasn't the original plan, but things work, so we'll see how it goes. And hopefully you'll like it. So this is about Maven Central, right? It's an interesting story because actually it starts with developers. That's where it all begins, right? At some point in your life, probably very regularly, you search for some code because you want something new and you Google for it, and you may hit Maven Central, Maven repository, whatever. You just want that, don't you? You want the cut and paste. Whether you want it in that form or whatever thing, you're looking for some dependency definition that you can pick up and stick into your Maven, POM, or whatever programming language, okay? And it's interesting, isn't it, just how many different ways there are that you can, in the Java space, that you can pick dependencies. Okay, so let's look at this a little differently. You're writing code, and the code that you write turns out to actually be a tiny fraction of the application that you produce. Because this is why you're picking dependencies. You're picking dependencies because there's all this great stuff out there. And it turns out like 90% of a modern application is a dependency that somebody else has written. Right, so actually, all that we do as developers lives or dies on our ability to get access to somebody else's code. And you can see this is a GitHub scan. Look, at the bottom it says 8.6 million Maven POM files. And that's just POM files, forget all the others. There's a lot of people out there producing this stuff because that's why we're here, because we make so much use. You use all these wonderful tools, you consume all this wonderful code, and it's great. You just put it in your POM, and whether or not you know it or not, it will come off from this repo, and it's just there. You put it in your POM, you do Maven compile, and stuff downloads. And if it doesn't download, you scratch your head and go and figure out what you did wrong because you spelt it wrong or you put it in the wrong place in the POM, whatever, right? So that's the background. That's what we all do. I want to talk about Maven Central itself, so you get a sense of what's going on there. I want to talk to you about what we're planning to do to evolve it, and then I'm going to give you some homework. Well, I may give you the homework as we go along, right? And then if there's time left, do a Q&A. So the first thing is Maven Central. Well, who knows? How many people here knew that Sonatype ran Maven Central? Okay, so a lot of you are going, it's not surprising because Maven Central, we think it's been around forever because, well, it pretty much has as far as Java is concerned. It was created by these two guys, Brian Fox and Jason Van Zyl. And in fact, they're also instrumental in creating Maven, the tool itself. So a very open source beginning for Maven Central. These people got together, they figured out we needed the build tools, and they also we need a repository system. So that's what they did. All open source. By 2003, already up and running, funded by public donations, one place, Maven and Maven Central, we were all in one place. By 2005, there was a split. Oh, by the way, the pictures mostly come from the Wayback Machine, so if all the images are not there, it's not my fault. It's because Wayback Machine forgot. By 2005, we'd split out Maven as a tool from Maven as a repo, but still funded by public donation. Lots of people reaching in their pockets and giving us cash to run this. And then you roll right forward to today, and well, it still exists, but it's funded by Sonatype. And so one of the questions you might want to ask is, why is it that a company is still, after all this time, quietly funding the center of the Java universe? And the simple reason is twofold. The first reason is that those two guys at the beginning this is what they wanted to do. This is all about the open source community. And this is, in one way, the Maven Central is the way that they gave back. They gave back Maven, but they went, we have to have this. And so it's bread and butter to Sonatype. It isn't, we're doing it as a favor. Well, we are supposed it is doing a favor. We're not doing it to make money. We're doing it because somebody has to provide it. And it just so happens that it's us. Internally, there isn't that much. Quite come out the way I thought it should. There's sort of three sets of users, as you imagine. So there are people who publish. You write code, you want to put it up on Maven Central, so you can publish it, and there's a whole bunch of tools for doing that. There's a search engine, a thing at the bottom. And then there's the bits where you want to download stuff, and that's the path in the middle. So there's a great big S3 bucket. Fastly is the piece in the middle that connects you to it, which gives us all the scaling. And then there's some elements in terms, which in this case, Jenkins jobs, which are basically moving things around because you publish, and then it has to go from the publishing system into the search systems and into the download systems. Okay, that's okay. So nothing particularly complicated, but it's busy. Right, so here's some of the numbers. 8.8 million versions of stuff, 27 terabytes of files, 79,000 different namespaces and organizations, so much stuff on Maven Central. And it's not gone down since it started. It's occasionally been unavailable because we had a couple of catastrophes on the internet that meant you couldn't reach it. But the service has been running ever since, quietly providing all this to you, which I think is pretty good, don't you think? 496 billion requests a year, 2021. So this is how many people use this. Download, download, download. Who's here downloaded stuff from Maven Central? Yes. Everybody does, more than once, of course. And you know that, you download something, and then the download something else, and you end up with multiple downloads. And sometimes you can be surprised that putting one little dependency in gives you half an hour of downloads, right? So there we go. It's a lot. It's expensive. Not stupidly expensive, but you can imagine it's a big S3 bucket and a whole bunch of bandwidth, and it's expensive. But I'm not saying this because, hey, we want some money from you. That's not the point, right? We're doing this because we think this is super important for the Java community, and it's what we do. So it's not going to go away. We're not going to turn it to charge it, but we are evolving it because we need to move it forward into the 21st century proper because there are new things going on. Okay, so there's something else that costs money, right? And that's keeping your application safe, because there's something else that Maven Central does for you that you may not spot. Okay. So there are layers of protection. And the first one is really easy. Unlike a lot of repo systems, if you want to put a binary up on Maven Central, which you are entitled to do, you have to prove that you own the domain name for the packages that you're pushing up. That's a really simple thing, but it is absolutely critical. Right? And so people go, well, but Node doesn't do that, and Python doesn't do that. And it's like, yeah, that's right. We do it for very good reasons. So that's it. You have to, first step is prove you own the domain. Because if you do that, then a whole bunch of nasties get limited or go away. So here's some weird names. So you've got org.apache.logging.log4j and then a version number, and then another one, and then another one. And you can see the bottom one is slightly wrong in spelling. Okay, this says the middle one actually, but you may not spot it. So imagine their package names and version numbers. Nowadays, what the bad guys will do is they'll try and play with you. So one of the things they will try and do is try and get you to download a later version that they own and that you don't. So imagine that you go to your dependency, you go to your POM and you go, oh, what's the latest version of this thing? And I go off to Maven Central and it says the latest version is 9999999. Okay, well that'd be all right if the latest version from the people who own that thing have released 9999999. But in other repos, it's quite possible that the first that thing that's been published is published by somebody who doesn't own the original code. So you can have thing version 1, thing version 2 published by 2 different people. And that becomes an ideal way of getting into your systems, because I can convince you to use the latest version. You download code from somebody who you weren't expecting. You can see that if you have to prove that you own the domain, that it becomes much harder for somebody to spoof that by trying to put in some big version number. Okay, so that's dependency confusion. The next one is what's called typo squatting, which is the idea that when you put in a dependency, you may have spelled it wrong. You may just transpose a couple of characters. So you like this one, it's got log J4. Okay, now this is quite feasible to happen in things like the Node space or the Python space, because as I said, you can register whatever you like. So that means that if you have made a mistake in your typing, there is the possibility that when you do Maven compile, that actually that type, that thing that exists with that type, that spelling, may actually be out there, because somebody's realized that if they squat on that spelling, you might one day make a mistake, and you can then pull down their code. Okay, so that's typo. Okay, and then there's another version of this right at the bottom where it says org.apache or apache. Okay, those first 2 types of attack are defeated when you have domain ownership proof, because you have to own that org.apache.logging domain to publish. So it doesn't matter what else you're trying to do. If you don't have that, you can't do that. And so ditto, if you try to publish something in org.apache.logging.logj4, you still have to prove that you own the main domain, so that would fail. But if unfortunately you made a typo and it was in the domain space, then that you can't be protected against that. Somebody could go out there and register that. But it's a really good start compared to what else happens, because believe me, in other spaces which don't have this protection, it's become a free-for-all. We now have really good examples of literally bots out there generating content, these spoofing content to try and catch you. So that's good. Maven Central gives you a level of protection that you do not get with most of these other repo systems. Unfortunately, everything else about keeping safe gets really hard, right? Because now you have to ask yourself, okay, if I know that this thing isn't overtly bad, how do I know that this thing that I've downloaded is good, right? Does it contain vulnerabilities? What's the point of picking version 10 if it's got a great big vulnerability? Right? How do you figure that one out? How would you go and figure out whether something you're downloading has got a vulnerability in it, right? And ditto with does it contain malware? How would you know? How do you figure it out? How do you stop it being used? How do you stop it being utilized? Right? So you're consumers of these things, and if we're lucky, you've got to invest in a whole bunch of tools to do the heavy lifting and tell you that that version that you've just picked is actually safe to use. Right? Well, the good news is that everything that gets pushed up onto Maven Central gets scanned using all the commercial tools that Sonatype produces, which probably, if you've got Nexus or things like that, then your company has probably bought that or you've used it yourself. there's a whole very large amount of effort in terms of people and engineering that goes into doing the scanning, because it's a matter of the technology is to figure out where in that jar file the bad code is, or try to identify it, and then there's also all the research and trying to understand what the vulnerabilities are. So the good news is, every time you download something from Maven Central, you can be assured that it's gone through all the rigorous assessment that we can apply to it. Okay? So that means that you could go to Maven Central, and now you can make more choices. So yes, you can go to Stack Overflow and find out that you should use this left pad thing, and you can go and get the coordinates, and you can go do it blindly. But when you're at Maven Central, take a look and see that you can get information about the quality, the state of vulnerabilities of these things. The information's there. You just need to make use of it. Now, what I see, you can't see it's in red, but the problem for us, for all of us, which is partly of what we're going to talk about in a minute, is this stuff, vulnerabilities, the whole space is evolving so much. It's just gone from a pretty, I would say simple, but a fairly understandable situation to a point now where we have very, very smart people trying to fool you, okay? And so the skills of the research team and the skills of the bad guys are getting better because there's literally a war going on, and we're doing what we can to help you. But unfortunately, as a developer, you tend to ignore all this. Homework, remember? Okay. So everybody goes, no, I'm good at this. We keep things up to date, and we never download bad things. And if we do find a vulnerability, we fix it instantly. And you go, yeah, absolutely. Of course you do. Who's heard of Log4j? Yes. How many people here had that nice Christmas where they had to go and do some patching? Yeah, a few of you. Yes, okay. This is, we have a dashboard. This is data from Maven Central for Log4j versions. And let me bring the numbers up. So see, come on. Okay. So since 10th of December, when this all hit, 51 million downloads of a Log4j version, right? 38% vulnerable. In the last 24 hours, 12,000 downloads, 33% of them are vulnerable. So that says 33% of you in this room, if you've been downloading Log4j, have been downloading a vulnerable version. So that either means you don't care or you don't know. Okay? Just think about it. What are we going to do to fix that? And you can go to this dashboard, and this number just basically doesn't seem to change anymore. We reached this point where it's in these numbers. Right? We can have all sorts of conversations about why it may be, but the net is that the most significant vulnerability that has ever existed is in 33% of Java applications still. Okay. And it's not good, because I said about the bad guys getting more, what's the word, vicious? Well, it used to be that they would just make use of vulnerabilities, but now it's much more sophisticated. They're trying to create their own vulnerabilities. And the reason that is because it's become evident that the value to nation states, effectively, in being able to compromise systems has become super evident. It's been around for a few years, but now in the last year or so, it's now got to the point where everybody understands that the next war is won or lost by your ability to infiltrate and affect your opponent's systems. And in fact, it's turning out to be not even this is like, oh, we're getting ready. This is starting to be used actively now. People are trying to get into your systems. They're trying to get into, hotel systems or pharmaceutical systems, delivery systems, whatever it is. Everything they're trying to get into. And their aim is to manipulate or terminate. So what that means is that they want to affect your economy. Imagine that they get into your system and they switch delivery addresses, or they do something like they hack your delivery cab. They hack the systems on the railway. They are doing this now. Everybody, and I mean everybody, is trying to figure out how to get into everybody else's systems to compromise either for long-term use or for active use, because they can screw with your economy now, then it makes it harder for you to do things. That's what's going on. And that's all about software. And that's all about us as developers not paying enough attention. So we have this wonderful battlefield of stuff that's going on. You saw some of the typo squatting, dependency confusion, where I try and convince you to use a bad version rather than a good version. There's all the how good are the good guys at finding vulnerabilities? How good are the bad guys at finding vulnerabilities? I should point out, because this is just as scary, is that if any of you think that you have time, so that when a vulnerability is reported, you think you have time to fix it, you don't have time. Because now major vulnerabilities are being suppressed. So the bug hunters who find these vulnerabilities are, in some instances, being paid millions of dollars not to report them. If they don't report it, you don't hear about it. And then eventually you do hear about it, and it's been exploited. Log4j, the big vulnerability, has been around since 2014. We were just lucky that we found it. But there are other ones out there, no doubt, that we don't know about yet. And at some point when you hear it, you have no time because it's been exploited. You have to do it. So that sort of stuff. Build systems. Yeah, they want to get into your build systems because we don't put security around build systems. We don't think about it. They want to get into your compilers, your operating systems. And they want to get into the open source projects because it's so much easier to not do typo squatting if I can get into a favorite open source project and subvert it. So there's a lot of activity going on now around what's around these open source projects and their behavior and how we can spot that this is happening. Right? And so what we want to do is start to get better insight into bigger things. So we're giving you access, we're giving you vulnerability information, but we want to go more than that. Right? And it's a sort of a new field. So there are things called SBOMs now. Anybody heard of SBOM? Yeah. Oh, good, look at that, hands go up. Nobody, people go, huh? SBOM? Yeah. So you have a dependency tree and you rely on the scanning tools that you've bought to understand how to analyze the code that you've got and figure out what vulnerability you do. It's an after the fact thing. They look at what you've got installed and try to figure out what you've actually got. What an SBOM will do, will inverts that. It means software bill of materials. It means that you will be able to see exactly what is made up, the software you're using is made up of. And that gives you complete visibility into all the components. And therefore, the vulnerability scanners don't have to figure out what you've got because they already know. So it makes it a lot easier to tell that you have vulnerabilities. And SBOMs are going to be a big thing, right? We're moving forward. SBOMs is going to be something you hear about more and more as a mechanism to help us provide some of this defense. So we've got SBOM support. You can get SBOMs for, is it Cyclone DX? You can get, Cyclone DX is one of the standards, but you can get SBOMs out of Maven Central. We're adding a thing called SigStore, which is sort of the complementary thing to SBOMs. SBOMs have to be digitally signed, and therefore you have to have a signature that you have to store somewhere. And so we're putting SigStore support in, and the publishing processes will join all of these things together. You'll see SigStore as another thing, another term that other people will be putting out. So look out for that as well. Right? So some technologies. We're also working with the Linux Foundation, CNCF, and others because we need to figure out how we analyze open source projects, how we look at the behavior of the people to see whether we can spot any of this stuff. And so it's not just a binary analysis, it's also a hygiene analysis, it's a behavior analysis. Do they have all the right audit mechanisms? Do they have simple things like, do they have a security.md file that explains how people should report vulnerabilities? All of that becomes important when you're choosing software, because if you're choosing software and you go, I choose this version, it has no vulnerabilities, but the open source project has 5,000 committers, you might go, maybe that's not good. Or maybe they seem to be fantastic, but they haven't released in 20 years, and now there's some new guys turning up and writing code. Is that good? Well, you may not think about it. You may not think about it in depth, but if we can give you more insight. And so that's what we're doing with CNCF, Linux Foundation, OpenSSF, and others, and you, right? So all of this ends up being this sort of enhanced developer intelligence. Can we give you more data to make your choices? And to be candid about it, the more that we can do, the more that we can work that out, they become things that we can put into our commercial products. Okay, so we can keep all this stuff going, we can give you all the data you want, because we have a product set where we can apply these things as policies. So businesses can start protecting themselves against these things, and literally everybody's happy. Right. I talked about enhanced developer intelligence. That's the SBOM one. There are other tools. So for instance, this one on the left is CLO Monitor. That's from the CNCF. They're putting up scorecards. They're asking themselves how to assess these projects. And these are sorts of things we're going to put in. And this one at the bottom is an old version of something which we're going to show you now. This is just the first sort of the thing that we want to go. We'd like your feedback, and we will probably be coming out with more things. But literally, like this is first go. So I'm going to invite AJ to come up, and we'll see if we can break handing over so you can see this in action.
It's always the risky part.
Yeah, do that bit. Way.
And success. All right. Everyone, Steve mentioned earlier, my name is AJ Brown. I'm a principal engineer at Sonatype. So I work in one of the R&D teams. So we do lots of these, call them,
what ifs? Enhanced developer intelligence.
Yeah, advanced developer intelligence. There we go.
I should just point out, we're not trying to improve your intelligence. We're just trying to give you more data, okay?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the person for that anyway. And so a lot of this data that we develop, pretty advanced algorithms, things like malicious package detection, things of that nature, end up in our commercial products. As we alluded to, this is a talk about Maven Central. We want to start getting this data more out into the wild so that you as source contributors or just users of Java can kind of maybe step up to that defense that we talked about earlier, where the really smart bad guys are really getting really good and the really smart researcher guys are getting really good, right? So how can we get that data out? Because most of this data is in our commercial products, one struggle we have in research is getting this out to people like you to get to use it. So we built this tool. It's a prototype, as Steve alluded to. So this is something you can get to today, right now. So if you go to bombdoctor.sonatype.dev, you can use this. But it's a bomb visualization tool that allow you to, the SBOMs we talked about before, software build materials, if you have one on your own, you can go here and upload it, and it'll show you what's in there and kind of show off some of the data that we have. I have some examples that'll make this demo a little easier. And as mentioned, this is a live demo, so if it breaks, that's part of the experience, right? So when you first get here, we will ask you if you have an invite token, as this is kind of in the...
Can you just 1 second? Sorry, because...
Oh, to bring the cards.
We have some cards. So
perfect, yes.
We're not selling it, but if you sign up for it in the next 2 weeks or something...
I believe it's if you upload an SBOM in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, you get the chance to win a $100 Visa gift card. Okay, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but I have loads of cards. Please help yourself if you're interested.
And the prize for me is your feedback.
Yes.
Like I said, this is something we're building right now.
Yeah.
So go here, sign up, get a token. I'm going to skip the token part. Hopefully that works just fine. And there's a couple options you have here. So I mentioned that you can upload your own SBOM, so I'll show that here in a little bit. You can pull up any Maven coordinate, so if you want to look at, for example, Spring Framework, you can see that as well. We have a couple of examples here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to randomly pick one, which is this Scalding project by Twitter. I'm not familiar with it, so this will be a good example. So the first thing we see here is the tree visualization. It's the first thing that jumps out to you, probably. But I'm going to start on the left-hand side and kind of explain what we're seeing here. So we have this score here of 381. The highest score is a 500. What we're trying to represent here is overall, how good is this SBOM, right? There's a lot of things that go into what good means. The first obvious thing is, are there vulnerabilities, right? But that's not the only thing. It's more about the choices that have been made to put into this SBOM, because in some cases, there's no avoiding a vulnerable component, for example, right? So we tried to build that into a score and try to give you a quick assessment of how well this thing is, right? If you got a 500 out of 500, you could probably stop here and move on and have pizza or whatever, right? If you had 100, you might want to look into this a little further. So some of that breakdown, that score, comes from vulnerabilities. That's the easy one, right? So we're doing okay on, well, pretty good on vulnerabilities there. We do consider popularity. This one's one we're working with a little bit. And if you're using components that not a whole lot of people are using, we kind of say you might want to look at that a little bit. I know there's different opinions on what popularity means, but that's something we're working through there. Licenses, people sometimes tend to forget about this. Those are important too. You can actually expose your organization to more risk if you use a bad license than a vulnerability, right? And everyone loves security vulnerability, so one thing we do try to call out right away is the summary of the unique vulnerabilities that are in this SBOM, right? And so this one has 5, I'm going to guess that's severe, severe vulnerabilities somewhere in this tree, this aggregate score. And we're trying to gamify this a little bit. The goal is to get you to make this SBOM better, right? So can I upgrade dependencies? Can I remove dependencies? Can I do something? If this was my open source project, can I fix something myself to make the score go up? So we've got this little bar here. You can imagine that doing some fun animation stuff later in the future, right? And everyone's favorite feature is this squirrel here, who I don't remember what name we decided on, but if you tell it to give it to you straight, it'll give you a little animation, and that changes based on what your score is. We'll come back to that. So a couple things you can do with the tree here is you can dive in. First off, again, green scores are good. Orange, I guess, is kind of in the middle, and then reds are your attentions, right? So this one's pretty good. What I can see here, there is a red over here, so we'll probably go down to that reflectasm component here in a bit. If I click on these individual nodes, so again, this left-hand side is the overall SBOM. So use this in my project, or whatever was in that SBOM, this is the overall score for it. If I click into the individual nodes, I get a score for that node. This is intended to kind of help you find what you can do, right? So what is this component? How did it get there? What did it bring in? What all comes with it as far as component quality score. I don't know if there's anything interesting on this one. Well, there is the quick auto and best version update. So we make these recommendations on what you can do to make this thing better. So I'm going to assume by the fact that there is a recommendation here that this version 0120 of this component is better than this one. When we make recommendations, there's actually 2 ways we do this. We do it based on what can you do quickly, which means just bump the version, and what might require a developer effort. So we essentially look at, are there any breaking changes in between those versions? We're doing some really cool things with that aren't here yet, but that's the idea is, what can I do automatically? Just open the PR version and we're good to go. Is there something I can go to if I'm willing to put some effort into this thing, right? All right, what else do we have here? So again, the scoring on the right-hand side is kind of the same as the left as far as the metrics that are used, but if you want to get a full breakdown of what that means, this is kind of our evidence screen. So why do we give it that score? There is an aggregate, which means it's me and the things I bring in versus the individual. And in this case, the aggregate is a little bit lower than the individual, so there's probably something down there. I'm going to guess that reflectasm component that actually brings the score down the most, right? Not to dwell on this too much, I want to check this one out. It's reflectasm. It's a really great name for a component, by the way. All right, anything interesting there? Yeah, nothing really new to show there. So That's most of what we have for this visualization here. Again, the goal is to show off some of the data we're producing. There's a little bit there now. We'll start to put some out there, and you can use it for free. If you have your own SBOM, you can upload one. And just to prove that that works, because this is a live demo, right? I am going to try to upload one without having a token that I memorized, and it may fail. Oh, perfect. It failed. No invite token. Good thing I'm prepared. So pretend I just uploaded that. So this is the actual, so CycloneDX produces a couple sample SBOMs that you can go to their GitHub and get them. This is one of them for Drop Wizard Parent. We may have tweaked it a little bit to get rid of some things, but you can see sometimes there's a lot to see here. And in this case, I would probably jump around to these red things a little bit more, and these updates might make a little bit more sense to me. Yep. In this case, it's a best version, so there's no auto update. So I know we're limited on time, so I don't want to spend too much more time on this. We'll talk a little bit more about the data that's going in there.
Yeah, but can you pull out as far as you can? Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, that's a bit too far.
Yeah, that is a little too far from the screen.
One of the things to take away from this is that what the SBOM gives you is it gives you complete visibility of your dependencies. Okay, and sometimes your dependencies are much detailed. There's more than you realize. So even if all you use this tool for is to get a view of the dependencies that you didn't realize you had, that might be a win because you get to see a little bit more about the quality of the stuff, right? Okay.
There is one important thing that I did miss.
Okay.
So again, this is not active today, but the idea here is that you could, by the way, this is a good example of quick auto update versus best version, is that you would be able to click one of these and it would take in what those changes mean and redraw that for you. So one way I've been trying to sell this is imagine doing all the dependency upgrade work and seeing the result before having to actually do that, right? And we can queue up that list, and then when you're saying, yep, I've got my score to 500, good luck, you should probably win a prize if you get 500, yeah. I think. What do I need to do to actually achieve that? And then maybe one day open a PR, or maybe one day apply those changes for you, or whatever. That's where we're headed. The goal right now for me is to get feedback, try your applications, try bringing up Maven coordinates there, just share what you see. If it's completely wrong, tell me that too. We can go adjust it. So,
yeah, cool. Thank you. We've got a couple more slides which we can talk through. Okay.
Can we get lucky twice with the transfer?
Yeah. Come on. Really?
Right.
Really? Really? Hold on. Can't see anything. So was what I'm just sorting that out. Was that useful? Did you like that? Did that get your brain going? Right, let's try this again.
Could have come up with some more filler.
So that was one view, and we'll the idea, of course, is to play from current slide. Please work. Yeah, okay. So we want your feedback because this has got to be useful. And we're trying to score things because we need to give you the ability to quickly assess it. There's no point us giving you 10,000 points of data and you go make it up. We need to make some choices. And we're working through looking at people's behavior and more to try and help bring this down to something that you can, that it becomes intuitive, that you understand that makes a reasonable choice and that you can apply that. We have all sorts of other data that we're available to. How would you describe this, apart from a mess?
So it's an interesting, I'll stand up.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting visualization to look at. It probably means nothing. What this is representing is a lot of so I mentioned I'm on the R&D team. One of the things that my team looks at specifically is behavior in the software supply chain. So downloads, what are people putting in their applications when they're scanning them, things of that nature, right? And so what we've discovered is there's this there's this zone of being reactive when it comes to updating your dependencies and proactive. And this kind of visualizes it. I'm not going to try to explain what the colors mean, but this is just how we come to those conclusions is data like this. Yeah. And so the recommendations that I showed just a couple minutes ago, some of that is behind that. So we understand how the herd is moving towards components. So if everyone is moving to this and everyone's successful and it's a good one to go to, that's a way better one to pick than some version that no one has yet. Yeah. You can also imagine scenarios where there's a project that publishes an update every single day. Do you really need to update every single day? Probably not. But how long do you wait? And so we're trying to answer questions like that.
Yeah, and little things like you see the herd move to something, and then they quickly move to the next version. So you realize that maybe you should just gone to the first version.
Yep.
And that insight we get because we've got Maven Central, the center of all this. So this sort of data and other things, more rules about how should you do this. We've been setting these things up. We need your input because we want this to be useful to you, because otherwise it's just us going, hey, wouldn't it be good if we could measure the weight of the software? It's what's important. And it doesn't even have to be, I'd say any ideas that you've got about what would really help make your life easier, we would like to hear. Okay? I think I've said that. Now, there's one more thing. Because we're enhancing developer intelligence, but we also need some help to enhance our fun. Okay? Because Maven Central doesn't have a logo. Right? So to come up with one. In fact, okay, we've been playing around. We've got some good people trying. We're talking about getting a temporary tattoo so you can remember that it's Maven Central. But there's no point. We can come up with this stuff, but again, we would love your help. And if you're going to communicate and let us know what you're thinking about, we would love you to send us examples or words or descriptions of anything that you think might be a great icon. We will no doubt figure out how to reward you, but right now it's basically send me your icon ideas, and thank you very much. If you want to play with the bomb doctor stuff, bombdoctor.sonotype.dev. Otherwise, go off to Maven Central and just have a look at what's new. And somehow we'll start communicating and asking you for more help. But right now, because we're right at the beginning of all this, we would really love you to just let me know. Finding me Twitter, on LinkedIn, or if you know anybody at Sonotype, then just feedback and let us know. That's it. Thank you. Right on time. Okay. Any questions? Brickbats? Plaudits? No. Okay. Yes.
Question on the UI. I think it's quite nice. I could respond by surfacing things like the component hash. I think that would be super useful because what we had seen in the past when we were working with other things like Jconf, which was 2%, is that you will get different shards coming from Maven Central and Jconf because Victory was basically the world itself. And we got many dependencies, many modules that didn't match. And it would be nice if you can surface, okay, not only vulnerabilities, but also this is the hash, this even module version. So when you work with your into, at least you can get some recommendation or something.
Okay. There's a lot there. What?
Yeah. So I think I followed the question. So the hash of the component is what you'd like to see in the UI. When you say UI, are you referring to the bomb doctor, are you referring to Central, or both? Okay. Because you have had applications that have had a different hash that didn't match what did for Log4j.
Same module, same version, same coordinates, different icons.
Right. Okay.
It's really hard to detect those. You need to analyze. We have to analyze modules, how we detect with that, and basically block them from coming from the center of them. The reality is that, I don't know, when people get like, we work in some companies, you might have like an internal repository that aggregates not only Maven Central, but other teams. You might get in trouble if at some point you're using something that is a superset that is probably developing just really well.
Right.
So having the hash would be definitely useful when you're exploring. Like, if I can see Guava 19 and say, and I just see a difference in the hash for what I have there and what I have in my application, then I know something is wrong.
Okay.
And I think seems like there has to be some collaboration between teams too, right?
Yeah.
I know for
Yeah.
granted that Maven does dependency verification. When it takes expensive, basically you need to declare every single dependency with the hash and also the repository it came from, and then the binding data. So if you can get into that space, I think it will be really interesting when it comes to data design.
Okay.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, what tools are you using that were giving you those different hashes?
We have our own things.
Okay.
But yeah, basically, we build something every time we publish, we take our expansion, we have a content, we provide all the moments in the class path, and then we analyze the checksums against where that came from, and then verify against Maven Central.
Yeah.
Right.
It sounds like you need like an S-bond, don't you, to help get proof of identity.
Yeah. I mean, the different file hash thing is definitely a problem that we've seen. I believe that's solved in life cycle though. We do this advanced binary fingerprinting thing that I won't jump into the sales deck for that because we don't have time. But definitely something to consider.
Okay. Any more? Okay. Cool. Well, listen, we only have a little bit of the conference left, but AJ's here, and we'll be around the booth or thereabouts. Please let us know. And I said, just as much as you can, let me know, or just say, hey, I saw this great talk and I've got this idea of an icon for Maven Central. I mean, we would love your feedback and your feedback on Bomb Doctor and your considerations about how you would like to make better choices. What information do you need from? We talked about things like the quality of open source projects. We talked about things like hashes, but it's also things like, do you want to know that this next version is a breaking API change? Would that make a difference? Because we can do some of that. Do you want to know what version of code it was compiled at? Or what compiler level it was compiled at? Because maybe it's latest and you didn't realize. I mean, tell us what will help you so we can put it on Maven Central so that you can see the data. Cool. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.